What's up, Canes fans? Welcome into another edition of the CanesInSight podcast. I am joined today by a friend of the show. He's been on here a few times, and it's baseball season. It's the hot time, right? Canes coming off a very impressive run at the ACC tournament, and now we'll be hosting for regional play this upcoming weekend. Javi Salas, former Miami Hurricanes pitcher, has done a lot of work calling games throughout the years, and he's been following this run very closely. Javi, excited to have you on tonight. Welcome.
Pete, man, great to see you. Great to be on the pod. It's all whenever I'm on, it's always a good time of year. That means baseball's playing deep into the postseason, and what a magical run they had this past weekend, as you mentioned, and just a good time to be a South Florida sports fan, man. The next 4 or 5 days are going to be absolute heaven in terms of the playoff caliber sports you're going to have down here, and the Canes are right in the middle of that.
Could be a long next 2 to 3 weeks down here. Obviously, if things fall the right way, super regionals could be here as well. But that's down the line, right? We're going to get into a bunch of things here. Of course, this segment seems like always when it comes to the baseball stuff is brought to you by Sala, Astorita, and Cox LLC, a boutique law firm which offers its clients in-depth experience in the areas of securities enforcement, white-collar crime, securities regulation, securities arbitration, and securities litigation. Their attorneys provide clients with specific skills and unique experience, and they're committed to providing their clients with quality service and individualized attention. A lot of these questions tonight, Hav, coming from our good friend Jim Sala from Sala, Astorita, and Cox. So let's just jump right into it, Hav. Before we get into the ACC tournament and what's ahead, what's your assessment of the regular season and how everything played out? There's always up and downs in the college season, right? But it seemed like they stabilized near the end and set themselves up for some success here in the postseason.
Yeah, it's crazy, Pete. I think, we talked at the beginning of the year that I outlined some keys to what I thought would be, the lead to the ultimate Cane success. And I think, 56, 60 games later, it's a totally different looking ball club than what they look like in mid-February, right? I think to your point, they're playing their best baseball right now. Obviously, to be the number 9 national seed is an incredible accomplishment. It goes to show the depth of this lineup, a lineup that set records, over 100 home runs hit, hadn't been done in over 10 years at the University of Miami, which is an incredible accomplishment. The pitching obviously has been the biggest, form of up and down for this ball club. There's been some weekends where we've known the Friday starter and Saturday and Sunday have been a total question mark. And we kind of find ourselves here again. You're hosting a regional. You have everything going in your way. You played a really, really good week in Durham at the ACC tournament. But ultimately, it's going to come down to that pitching, Pete. I'm a pitcher. I understand that, these regionals, if you need to come out of the loser's bracket, you need to have, 6, 7, 8 arms deep just to make sure that you can play into Sunday and have a chance to win the regional. So I think the formula for the Canes is pretty simple. You got to pitch well, and you got to rely on the long ball and some of those mashers in the middle of that lineup. In terms of the assessment of the overall season, Pete, I think, I tip my hat to Gino, JD, Norberto, and everybody else on that coaching staff to be able to piece together the way they did, win 40 games, be the number 9 national seed, have a puncher's chance in the ACC tournament when, they arguably had one of the tougher routes to get there. They had to beat the number 1 team in the nation in Wake Forest. They were playing in horrific conditions, pouring rain. So I think it just goes to show this team what it's made of. There's some guts there. This team played really well. And you're playing at home at Mark Light Field in June. That's a really big accomplishment, and that's a huge feather in your cap.
Did that run surprise you at all? I mean, obviously, if they would have been able to hold on against Clemson, it would have been amazing. But you still need to show some pitching depth, right? In the tournament.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of did it surprise me? No. I think we knew they had the bats to get there. Yo-Yo Morales goes on an unconscious kind of like blacking out run. The rest of the lineup follows suit, and they pitched well enough to get there. Andrew Walters was incredible. He pitched the first 3 games of the tournament. sort of, propelled the team to that championship game. And, Pete, you're 9 outs away from beating, the number 4 national seed in Clemson. It's a huge matchup. Miami played well enough to win the game. Unfortunately, one, really bad inning sort of did them in. So in terms of the tournament, I thought, over a 4-game span, they played really, really great baseball. They had one inning that just got away from them. And unfortunately, that was probably the deciding factor between the 8 and 9 seed. Obviously, if they are the ACC champs, I think they certainly have a case to be a top 8 national seed. But, here we are, Pete. It's a regional at home, man. So, anything could happen at this point.
So you've already, kind of mentioned Walters and Morales, right? And they've been the stars on each side, on the pitching side and on the hitting side. Other than those two, if you can single out a pitcher and someone from the lineup that has really, to you, been, a big part of this run and moving forward, going to be a big part of their success, give me a name for each.
So from the pitching standpoint, I mentioned him in the preseason pod, but I think it's Alejandro Rosario. He had a good outing against Wake Forest in bad conditions. The fastball looked good, looked like he was commanding the zone with all his other pitches. He's got the best stuff on the staff. I mean, and it's pretty evident that, his stuff can play at the next level. We're talking about a mid-90s fastball, good slider, good changeup. He's an athletic kid. There's just been too much up and down with his season. There hasn't been a whole lot of consistency, but when it does click for him, it's special stuff. So if Miami's going to win this regional and make a run into a super, you're going to need to rely on Alejandro Rosario for, probably 12, 15, 18 outs if you can get it at some point this weekend. So that's who I'm looking at from a pitching perspective. On the hitting side, obviously this lineup revolves around Yo-Yo. But I look at some of the top of the order guys, right? Like Kafis, Villegas, those guys live on base. And when you have a guy like Yo-Yo in the middle of the lineup, he's going to be the focal point of every scouting report this weekend. If he comes up with guys on base, you can't pitch around him. If there's nobody on base, Yo-Yo's not going to see a fastball this weekend. So I really look at the Kafis, the Villegas, and some of the guys at the bottom of the order, maybe a guy like Jacoby Long to be on base so that Yo-Yo can come up in some situations with runners in scoring position. Situations where pitchers have to throw them some fastballs. A lineup works in a funny way. Like, you obviously have focal points, but some of the other guys got to row the boat too and make sure that they get on base and allow those big boppers to come on with guys on base.
So looking at this Coral Gables regional, you have Texas, you have Louisiana, you have Maine coming in. I don't know how much you kind of looked at these 3 teams, right? But obviously Texas pops off paper because they're a traditional team, and it seemed like they were playing pretty well before they went 0-2 at the conference tournament. So is this one of those situations where it's great that the Canes are hosting, but you have a tough regional to get through, or do you think this is a favorable matchup for them?
Yeah, I mean, look, you look at a regional and they're always tough, Pete. I mean, as however you want to dice them, it's 1 through 4. These are all teams that were worthy to be in the NCAA tournament. They could have ended up anywhere, and they ended up here in Miami. So all that's out the window now. You got to figure out how to beat the team that's in front of you.
And the 9 seed, the 9 national seed, nonetheless. Yeah. So I mean, they were, if they hold their on against Clemson, you probably have to assume that they're a top A seed.
Yeah, I would have thought. I mean, I had them penciled in as that between 9 and 12 after the Clemson game, and I was probably leaning more to the 11-12 seed. And the fact that they got 9 just goes to show that they were really close to that top 8. Man, I mean, a couple bounces here and there, but that's all in the past now. I think to your point about Texas, that's a huge name, right? You see Texas that jumps off the paper when you look at this regional. Obviously, Miami and Texas, 2 of the bigger traditional baseball powers in NCAA history. They're probably going to have a ton of fans. Louisiana Lafayette, that's a program with a lot at stake. They lost in the championship game of the Sun Belt Conference. They're always in the conversation around this time of year. They're a senior laden team. They're not going to be intimidated. It's just as humid as it is in Louisiana as it's going to be in Miami. So those guys are going to be prepared. And then you look at Maine, right? Maine has some South Florida connections, man. A bunch of Christopher Columbus, my fellow alumni, have gone through that program. They recruit a ton down here. You look at the top of their order, they got a couple guys with 16 plus home runs. They got 2 guys with over 30 stolen bases. So you end up looking at the draw and you think to yourself, well, we earned the 9 overall seed, and you gotta look at the opponents. And the most important game of the year, like Coach Morris always used to say, is going to be that Friday night against Maine. You got to get into the winner's bracket, and then
Set the tone.
Yeah, you got to set the tone. You got to figure out, how you can get into that winner's bracket. And look, man, there's no beating around the bush here. Miami does not have the arms to come out of that loser's bracket at this moment. Like, you got to be in that winner's side. You got to win that first game. You have to set yourself up for the rest of the tournament, and that starts Friday at 7 p.m.
Now, let's talk about a few other guys in specific. Cinta, the freshman pitcher. What have you thought about him when he's had the opportunity?
Yeah, man, Chris Cinta's for me, it brings back a lot of memories, like a Chris Diaz, Brian Radzewski, one of those traditional Miami lefties that he just gets outs, man, and he's fearless out there. He's got a good fastball, good breaking ball, and he's really polished and mature for a freshman, right? You think about where this guy is in his career and development wise. I mean, he's pitching in really high leverage situations. He's kind of a swing man for this Miami rotation. I thought he could probably be used as a starter if he wanted to. JD sees him as a sort of that long middle relief role where he's going to get you 7 to 12 outs, and he's been really consistent. So I'm a huge fan of his. I love the way he pitches. I love his bulldog approach. We're definitely going to need him. I mean, left-handers this time of year, they got to get those lefties out, and Cinta's no different here. Pete, I'm very curious to see what the rotation looks like. Who they name the starter. I assume internally it's already been named and that person knows who it is, but I'm very curious to see what the plan is going forward. I think, something we saw at the ACC tournament, which caught my eye, was the way that they approached each game in sort of this do or die tournament format, right? So we saw guys pitch 3 straight days. We saw Lecarica, we saw Torres, we saw obviously Andrew Walters pitch 3 straight days. That's the sort of effort you're going to need in a regional. We're probably going to rely on those guys to, again, pitch 3 straight days. And hopefully it's 3 straight days and they're done, right? So if you're in the winner's bracket, it's a 3 and done and you're out of there. But I personally, I like the way they approach the games. They've been piecing together games for the last 6 or 7 series. So why not continue to do that? They played each game to win that day, and that's the way you got to approach the tournament, man. Because the next game is not guaranteed. It really doesn't matter. You have to win the game in front of you. You figure out tomorrow your future problems. You figure those out when they come. So, Cinta's definitely going to be in that mix. I definitely anticipate him pitching multiple days over the weekend.
And then a couple other guys, Blake Sear and then Jason Torres, their futures at Miami. Obviously, Jason Torres most likely to take over for Yo-Yo next season. But what do you see from those guys moving forward?
Yeah, man, Sear's been incredible. For one, as a pitcher, I keep thinking to myself, how do you get this guy out, right? Because as a freshman, especially at the collegiate level, there's guys have holes in their swings, right? He's never played this level of competition, but he just keeps evolving. He keeps morphing, man. And there's so much to his game that just catches your eye and jumps off the page. At the ACC tournament, first couple games, he wasn't hitting all that well. He drew 5 walks, I think, or something like that. Hadn't made a huge impact. And he comes up in that weight game in a huge situation, intentionally walked Yo-Yo. Actually, that was against Clemson. But in the weight game, he comes up with runners on second and third and smashes the ball right up the middle and scores 2 runs. Like, this kid's fearless. His approach at the plate is awesome. I don't see a lot of fear when he comes to the plate. He looks like a guy who has an approach, and as a pitcher, it really, kind of takes you aback, especially, thinking like this kid's really a freshman. Like, are you kidding me? Like, right. What's his ceiling like if this is what he is as a freshman? So, I'm really excited to see him in this tournament. I'm excited to see Torres too. I know Torres has had, some sort of spotty at-bats throughout the season. Obviously, Pete, man, you're playing behind Yo-Yo Morales, who's going to be a first-round pick in a couple months here. Opportunities are few and far between, but when he has had the opportunity, he's really shown something, right? He's got some serious power. He has an idea what he's doing at the plate. He's one of the most prolific hitters in Dade County history. So, if he gets his opportunity in front of a packed house, I'd put my money on Jason Torres for sure.
How about Yo-Yo giving Harold Martinez the shout out the other day?
That was
That was
cool,
cool to
man.
see.
That was cool. I know, obviously we know Harold well, and Harold's had a lot to do in Yo-Yo's development, and you know, I got the opportunity to play with Harold, and Harold was like sort of a larger than life, figure at Miami, right? I think University of Miami always has those guys that are sort of, the big time guy. Everybody knows who they are when they walk up to the plate. Everybody's attention turns. All the little kids know Yo-Yo. So it was cool to see, man. And Yo-Yo was absolutely out of this world in that tournament. I mean, there was no pitch that he didn't hit, and he didn't hit hard. What really caught my eye about Yo-Yo is he's such a good hitter, Pete. Like, there's balls that he hits where it's almost like he's setting pitchers up, right? He knows that he's not going to see a whole lot of fastballs throughout the game. So when he does get that one pitch, man, whether it's a single at 110 miles an hour off the bat or it's a home run to the opposite field, like, he's scary. And
He takes advantage, yeah.
he takes advantage, man, and he knows what he's doing. He's got an approach at the plate. I think it's cool too, Pete. Like, we talk about intangibles, and it's hard to put a number on that kind of stuff, but you could tell Yo-Yo has the respect of everybody in that locker room, right? That I point to one play against Wake Forest. He hits that ball in the gap, and it was a home run on TV. The umpires didn't call it a home run, but Yo-Yo's, busting his ass around the bases and scores an inside the park home run. And, he's flying. He's going 100 miles an hour. There's no holes in his game. He's got speed. He's athletic. He flashed the leather. He made some unreal defensive plays. So, man.
And listen, I mean, I think from all accounts, he's matured a lot in his time in Miami. This is a guy who is a very good example of essentially someone who had all the talent to be a top 3 round pick, right? Coming out of high school and could have done that without a doubt, but comes to Miami and, ends up really developing here where he's put himself in a great situation moving forward for the rest of his baseball career.
Yeah, no doubt, man. I tweeted the other day, it's like he's the equivalent, you'll see him on Sundays kind of guy that you say the college football players, like, you're going to see Yo-Yo have a really long and prosperous major league career, no doubt about it.
So last thing here that we that I'll leave you with, and we'll wrap up this podcast with. I know it's a tough question because no one has a crystal ball, but just knowing what you know about how this baseball business works, right? Who do you see as the guys who leave or go, or stay, I should say, for the draft next year? We have to assume Yo-Yo's gone. So
yeah, I think right off the bat, you anticipate Yo-Yo being gone. And the lineup in terms of what you lose is where I start looking at it, right? You got a Kafis at first base, having another unbelievable season. You have to imagine he's going to get some looks in the draft. Zach Levinson, the right fielder, another one. It's tough to gauge where he'll go. I mean, I like you mentioned, I don't have a crystal ball, but I think he's put enough on paper to show major league teams that he's worthy of a draft pick. Carlos Perez had a really nice year behind the plate. He's draft eligible. And then from the arms, you have obviously Andrew Walters, who, turned down his draft position last year to come back. You have to imagine he's going to get drafted again. Alejandro Rosario, although the numbers aren't there, the stuff certainly is. And I'm sure some major league ball clubs are looking at it and saying, we'd like a chance to, paint with that canvas right there.
That's the DJ Ivy right there.
Exactly, man.
All fans out there.
The numbers are deceiving with that kid, Pete, because you look at stuff wise, and I'm sure there's pitching coordinators and scouting directors that are saying, I can work with that. I can figure out, how to make it click with this guy, and I'm sure he'll get some opportunities. So, I mean, right off the bat, you have the left side of your infield, Yo-Yo and Don Patelli, possibly losing a first baseman, and CJ Kafis, a right fielder. But, man, you got to be excited about some of the youth movement too. Some guys have really flashed some real, potential. And at the University of Miami, Pete, it hasn't been like we've, had very many rebuilding years. I really can't point to many years that say, we lost so much talent and there's not much coming in. Gino, JD, Norberto, they'll figure out a way to to reload this roster. And that transfer portal's been good to us, man. They figured out a way to get guys across all sports. So I'm not worried about that. I think from a draft standpoint, enjoy the guys this weekend. You got another chance to catch them at Mark Light Stadium. So go out there and support.
The pressure's on, man. I mean, we talk about the success locally of the sports teams. I mean, we had the basketball team in the Final Four, so obviously we know the football team has some ways to go. Great start, number 9 national seed, obviously matched up with the Stanford regional, the Palo Alto regional. So if Miami wins and Stanford wins, then Canes will travel cross country there. So hopefully we have a segment next week where we are previewing that. That would be the best case scenario. Well, the best case scenario, I guess, would be previewing the Coral Gables Super Regional.
Yeah.
Which would obviously be another great weekend down here in South Florida and Coral Gables. But Javi, appreciate the time as always, and let's see what happens this weekend. Like you said, let's see some good support out there at Mark Light, and go Canes.
Let's do it, Pete. I appreciate you having me, man. And one last message, Canes fans, this is a great opportunity to go out there and support the team, man. It's going to be a really fun weekend. I think regionals at Mark Light are special. Bring your kids, bring the family, bring your loved ones. Make sure you get a milkshake. I saw they have some really interesting milkshakes for some of the visiting teams this time of year. So it should be a fun weekend. It's a great time in South Florida. As always, I appreciate you, Pete. I appreciate the opportunity to come on here. And like you said, man, hopefully next week we do it all over again.
Let's get Salas back on ACC Network.
Let's do it. Let's get Salas on ACC Network.
All right, man. Talk to you
All
later.
right, Pete.
Go Canes.